Today, May 23rd, 2023. Can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Roll call, please, Madam Clerk.
Mayor Beagle,
I'm here.
Deputy Mayor Resnick,
Present.
Councilmember Behrman,
Present.
Councilmember Gotchel,
Here.
Councilmember Grenlin Fox,
Here.
Councilmember Sharp,
Present.
Councilmember Smiley,
Here.
quorum present.
Thank you. Change the additions to the agenda as presented tonight. City Manager?
Yes, I do have one, Mayor. I wanted to add an additional piece of correspondence that came in from a resident regarding the Maple Road project. Correspondence was provided to council yesterday, but I wanted to add it formally to the agenda.
Assistant City Manager Benson, anything?
No, sir.
Very good. Anything from the dais? Councilmember Gotchel?
Thank you. I'd like to add new business to discuss the new correspondence list.
All right, that'll be new business number 5. All right, moving on. Moves us to a public hearing. It's a public hearing for fiscal year 2023-2024, proposed budget public hearing. Do I have a motion?
So,
Support.
I'll read the rules for the public hearing. Persons wishing to address the council shall state their name and address. Individual persons shall be allowed 5 minutes to address the council. There shall be no questioning by the audience of the persons addressing the council. However, the council may question persons addressing the council, and no person shall be allowed to address the council more than once. So with that, I'll open the public hearing. Have we over to Marilyn?
Yeah, Marilyn, you want to kick off?
Yep. Good evening, everyone. Tonight we are required to hold a public hearing in accordance with Section 8.3 of the Charter. Most specifically, we have to hold the public hearing for our proposed millage rates in order to levy those in the upcoming year. And I will go over some highlights of the revised budget that we made the modifications to following our last budget session. And you should have copies of those in front of you. We originally presented the budget on April 11th and subsequently held a budget session on April 18th. Our City Council made several changes as noted on the first slide, which contains our general fund changes. The overall decrease to revenue was $61,482, and that was mainly due to the incoming revenue to cover the capital project manager. So those were removed out of those revenue line items, and then a slight inflationary increase to the DDA contribution charge for services. As far as expenditures for the general fund, expenditures were reduced $212,021. Those were specifically related to the 3 full-time positions, changing the full-time clerical to part-time, removing the resource officer and the capital projects manager. On the next page are the other fund changes. The first one was actually a subsequent change after the meeting that was discussed with the DDA to record a contribution to the downtown safety path. So we increased revenue in the safety path fund by $131,111. As far as decreases to expenditures, the total decrease was $43,562. Those were also related to removal of capital project manager expenditures from those other funds. We reduced safety path allocation for downtown site readiness by $100,000. We had a slight inflationary increase for the DDA contribution, and then the opposite recording of the expenditure by the DDA for the safety path downtown. Okay. The next slide is just a reiteration of our proposed millage rates for the next fiscal year. This is required by the public hearing in order to assess these next year. We're looking at remaining the same at 11.8821. That still keeps us as 7th lowest in the county, which ranges from 8.354 to 34.5157. Next slide goes over the revenue increase that we saw from the prior fiscal year. Revenue was up $657,731, or approximately 4.7481%. The majority of that was tax revenue increases due to inflation and some slight variations in other funds. We also had the increase in the DDA contribution to cover the additional equipment operator, and water wastewater charge for services were recalculated because that had not been done in some time, and that increased $81,661. As far as our revenue categories, tax and special assessment still remains our highest. Get there? There we go. Our highest incoming revenue of just shy of $9.5 million. Licenses and permits at $675,300. State shared revenue, our second largest funding, of $2,303,199. Other revenues of $1,167,866. Charges for services, $826,663, and transfers in, which is the library contribution to the OPEB and pension funds, of $48,276. Next slide shows a summary of expenditures. Expenditures decreased just over $2.9 million, or 16.93% compared to the 22-23 budget. The main factor of that was $3.597 million that we had allocated to other funds in the prior year that we had utilized fund balance to contribute to those funds. Majority of changes were positions, wages, fringes. For the most part, that's the majority. And that includes adding the 3 positions to next year's budget. And that's really shown on 2 slides because we had quite a bit of detail on those of changes. So the following slide, the budget continues to provide for OPEB contribution of $79,435, pension contribution of $178,944. And we also have an amortization payment for the pension of $91,032. With the modifications that were made, the general fund reflects a close of fiscal year 23-24 fund balance of $5,610,997, or 39.21%. The DDA continues to contribute to the general fund expenditures. They are also able to continue to cover their DDA debt payment. We've increased the contribution to $250,339, which includes certain services along with the funding of that DPW operator. The Budget Stabilization Fund reflects an estimated balance at the close of the fiscal year of $1,317,174, or 9.2%. Permanent full-time positions will increase to 59 employees compared to last year's 56. Still compared to 2003-04, that's an 8.42% reduction in staffing. The added positions include the DPW equipment operator funded by the DDA, a police sergeant, and a fire department secretary. Solid waste and recycling will increase by $2 up to $167. Sewer utility rates will remain the same as last year, along with water utility rates and residential sewer charge caps, sewer-only customers, all of that will remain the same as fiscal year 22-23. There were no changes to the capital improvement plan. We will have a $1,020,000 annual contribution to the capital improvement fund with an additional $300,000 contribution to fund one-time expenditures for information system network upgrades and some fiber work that needs to be done for connectivity. Overall, we anticipate a total of $4,384,900 in capital improvement expenditures across all departments. As far as road safety path and water wastewater capital improvements, major road improvements remain the same that was in the preliminary budget of $1,592,900 to cover the completion of West Maple, Beck Road widening, easement documents, road and drainage repairs, some tri-party costs for various projects throughout the city. Local road improvements remain the same at $2,141,500 for pavement management and preservation, general repairs, Loon Lake, Palmer, Hopkins, Highgate, and Cliffs of Loon Lake. Safety path improvements modified a little bit just due to the capital manager contribution. That went down to $1,460,000, and that will cover Wixom Road, Potter to Palmer, Wixom Road, south of Pontiac Trail, the downtown sidewalk project, and 12 Mile and some various maintenance projects throughout the city. Wastewater improvements are $4,671,305. This includes the completion of the clarifier recoat and install project, solids handling, roof replacements, and some other modifications at the plant. Water improvements, $200,050, covering meter replacements, hydrants, and some general repairs throughout the system. And that concludes my highlights for the budget hearing.
Very good. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and move on to the next item of business. It's approval of minutes. We got two sets of minutes to approve tonight. The first one is the budget study session minutes of April 18, 2023. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Support.
Any questions, corrections, additions? Seeing none, I got a motion and a second to approve the budget study session minutes of April 18, 2023. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the second set of minutes to approve tonight is from the regular city council meeting of May 9th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Support.
Any corrections, deletions? Seeing none, I got a motion and a second to approve the regular city council meeting minutes of May 9th, 2023. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that carries. Moving on to correspondence, we have one added item tonight, and that's a letter from resident Stephanie Caldwell on the Maple Road project. And that moves us to the first call to the public. The rules to the call to the public are as follows. The public shall address the council during call to the public, which shall be included on the agenda immediately after correspondence and again immediately after new business. The first call to the public immediately after correspondence shall be limited to agenda items only. A person shall not address the council in excess of 5 minutes unless the time is extended by a majority vote of the council present. Persons wishing to address the council shall identify themselves and their place of residence and shall state their reason for addressing the council, and all comments by the public shall be made directly to the council. Do we have anybody for the first call to the public? Seeing none, I'll close the first call to the public and move on. City managers' reports. The first report tonight is the departmental report of April 2023. Any questions? Deputy Mayor Resnick.
Yes, I have one for Economic Development Director and Assistant City Manager Benson. I saw a lot of activity this week on the Heath building. It looks like renovations are underway. I saw painting going on and some brick ceiling this week. Do we have a tenant or a purchaser of the property now?
So the property was purchased. We have met the new owner. They don't have official plans yet. They also have not officially submitted for building permits in terms of interior renovations. We have had conversations about what that involves, and there is some work to be done inside. They do have the ability to paint the exterior and kind of improve it. The plan, as we understand it, is to basically fix it up and then kind of white box it and then work to find a tenant. So we'll be working directly with them and their real estate agent, and we will see what happens. But there are a lot of options, and then we'll see what they do with the upstairs. The kind of initial thought is that they may not do that immediately and fix those up after they've got a first floor tenant, but we're going to try to encourage them to do both, get it all done at once. But yes, a lot of positive improvements there.
Thank you.
Councilmember Behrman.
Thank you. My question is also for Drew. In reviewing your report, I saw that you were meeting with several different boards and commissions, and then reading the minutes from one of the commissions, the comments on you was, it's anticipated that Mack Park will be expanded once the buildings are torn down, since there's already a park in that area making improvements. When did we decide we were expanding Mack Park? Because I seem to believe that our discussion when we decided to buy those properties was not that.
No, and I apologize that I think that's a bit of a misinterpretation. Really, I think the intention is that we're going to look at it, if by anything expansion, I really kind of anticipate in terms of parking, expanding the availability of parking. It currently doesn't have any. But no, you're absolutely right. No decisions have been made. I think we'll dive more into that in next week's joint meeting. But I do apologize for the kind of misstatement in the minutes.
There's no plan to expand the park. It's been discussed. If it made sense to slightly expand it, that could be something where it would be something we'd have to readdress if that decision was made. But by the same token, it might stay exactly as it is right now. There's been no plans for that.
And those are ultimately decisions really that this body, city council, would make before that's official by any means.
It's what the minutes from another body say, so I guess that's my concern.
Understood.
Councilmember Sharp?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a comment on the senior programming. As one who's getting closer and closer to chair volleyball and Zumba Gold, I was impressed by the number of members. It looks like we've recovered from pre-COVID and exceeded a lot of good programming. And I just wanted to thank Melissa and her team for continuing to advance the senior programming. Thank you.
Definitely worthy of thanks. It's going very well at the senior function, and it's largely due to Melissa Burns' leadership there, so we appreciate all of her good efforts.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the quarterly budget and investment report for March 2023. Any questions for Marilyn? All right. And that moves us to the consent agenda. All items listed under the consent agenda are considered routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests, in which event items will be removed from the consent agenda and added to the regular agenda at the end of unfinished or new business. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support. I have a motion and a support. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moves us to the tabled item. We have one tabled item tonight, and that is a recommendation to adopt a resolution to revise the City of Wixom planning and zoning fee schedule to be effective May 24th, 2023. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right, item is open. Assistant City Manager Benson.
Thank you, Mayor. This is obviously a continuation of an item we discussed at the May 13th meeting. City Council had formally requested that we try to find ways to lower the single-family residential variance cost that previously had been proposed to be increased to $500 to cover the costs in our kind of traditional methodology of 25% administrative fee. We did do a little bit of research in terms of looking at other communities in the state charge, as well as having a conversation with our planning consultants who do those reviews. They were amenable to decreasing their fee from $350 to $250 for a 28% decrease for the charge for doing single-family residential variance reviews. And to further kind of expand upon that, through a conversation with Steve, I think administration's also willing to not charge an administrative fee for single-family residential variance reviews in order to keep the cost, relatively speaking, in line with what it previously had been. Also in line with what our kind of similar communities have. I do see that I think I missed that attachment in your agenda packet, so I apologize. We did look at communities, Milford, Novi, Auburn Hills, Farmington, Ferndale, a lot of similar communities to us, and their single-family variance costs ranged anywhere from $200 to $500, with an average of about $312. So at this $250 number would be below the average and relatively close to what we currently charge. Everything else within the proposed fee schedule is the same as our previous discussion, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to try to address them.
Any questions? Councilmember Grenlund Fox?
I don't have a question, but I would just like to thank administration for looking into that further and getting those compliments. Thank you.
Councilmember Smiley?
Thank you, Mayor Beagle. Can you repeat, I missed, you said it's going to be below the cost of what was the average cost of the communities around us?
The average cost of the 9 communities that we looked at was $312.63.
Okay, I missed that part, sorry. And just pass on my thanks to Carlisle Wardman for, working with us on this and bringing it down. That's all, thank you.
Councilmember Sharp? Councilmember Behrman?
Just as well wanted to say thank you. That was my only concern with this last time around, and you guys have addressed it. I appreciate that.
Anybody else? Yep, and I want to thank administration for taking care of this and working with Carlisle Workman and taking care of this in a satisfactory manner that the board here can approve. So with that, I got a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to adopt the resolution to revise the City of Wixom Planning and Zoning Fee Schedule to be effective May 24th, 2023. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very good, motion carries. Moves us to unfinished business, which we have one item of unfinished business tonight. That's a recommendation to approve the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget and adoption of the requisite budget resolutions. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support?
Very good. Go ahead, Marilyn.
Just real quick, again, in accordance with Chapter 8, Section 8.4 of the City Charter, we staff bring tonight the recommendation to approve the fiscal year 23-24 budget and the adoption of the required resolutions to do so. And that is all I have.
Very good. Any questions? Councilmember Gatchel.
Thank you. With the addition of the DPW position dedicated to the DDA, what do we expect the changes to be within the DPW budget and overtime? Anything?
I guess the first thing I'll say before, Tim on the operations side can speak a little more. The appropriation from the DDA does not specifically cover overtime. The anticipation is that any work that's provided, covered within the scope of work under the memorandum of understanding that we'll get to later is intended to be kind of done during regular work hours. So any overtime.
Sorry, I mean like for the other people that won't be the DDA.
Right.
So can we expect our overtime report numbers to go down since they would have more free time? Not free time, but
Need more help. So I would say that I really would have a difficult time forecasting any kind of meaningful impact on the overtime side of things because it's going to depend on how much of the time of that new position is taken up with work actually in the DDA, which I think is going to be a pretty good portion of that work. And then it's a question of the timing or the additional work time that's made available to the DPW. How would that translate to an impact to overtime? Tim, I don't know if you have any kind of response to that. I would say I can't really give you a meaningful reaction to that right now until we find out how much work is being done on DDA stuff, if you will, on a day in and day out basis.
Well, and overtime is often reflective of kind of emergency scenarios. It snows when it snows, and
We have no control over that.
yeah.
That's an excellent point as well. It's not so much because we're going to schedule it because we aren't getting things done, and that it's oftentimes driven by circumstances and what's happening with the weather and things of that nature. That's an excellent point as well.
a portion though. A good chunk is also event setup and takedown.
Correct. I would expect to have some impact, but I would hesitate to characterize that kind of an estimate. I would see a reduction, but I couldn't really give you an idea of what the percentage is or anything like that.
Okay.
It's a little TBD at this point.
And then to clarify on the part-time floating staff position, what is currently being missed in work that kind of necessitates us having that position? Is it like extremely important work that's being missed, or is it more stuff we would like to get caught up on, like scanning documents and more like project-oriented catch-up work?
And I would say that there is a bit of that, but there's also, even on a part-time basis, the possibility of being able to cover some of the day in and day out impacts that happen because of normal people being out of the office, right? If we have somebody that's available on a part-time basis, perhaps we can get enough coverage through that to cover when we've got a vacation scenario that's impacting coverage in the building department or in finance or something akin to that. Mostly probably in forward-facing positions like the finance department and the building department, construction and development services, in other words. That's what we would look at. And we haven't had a lot of conversations on that front. I think we were waiting for the budget adoption, and then we're going to go from there in terms of what we think we're going to obtain through that part-time position and how we would implement it.
The only piece I'll add to that is, yeah, it definitely will be most impactful during the busiest seasons, whether that's tax collections or in the finance department when they're putting together the budget, which then takes away Marilyn or the deputy treasurer's time. We can maintain the same service level regardless of what else is going on. So that's the intention behind the positions. And then, as Steve mentioned, between vacations for the various full-time secretary positions, we think that this will allow us to be more consistent, which isn't always the case in our current scenario, depending on the time of year and the circumstances.
Aside from like departmental busy seasons, are we falling behind in certain stuff? Like important stuff is not getting done? Or is it just
No, the
more
important thing
tedious
is,
stuff is not getting done?
I would say important things always happen. The not important things, like you mentioned, scanning or just general digitization. And there's numerous things that Marilyn could probably highlight better from finance that yes, we don't do because we don't have the time or the bandwidth to do them. So this would allow us additional capacity in slower times where that person's available to then try to catch up on some of the things that we otherwise haven't had the ability to do.
And there's cost savings to be realized there, right? If we can reduce the amount of off-site storage that we do by virtue of doing additional scanning, that's something that we can reduce some costs on that front. If we can take back some of the files and have it electronically as opposed to storing it and paying for it on a pound-by-pound basis kind of thing, that's a potential long-run benefit of that kind of an investment.
What kind of a rate are we looking at paying that person, or have we not determined?
Yeah, I haven't really gotten into it.
Okay. I'm just, part of my worry, and I appreciate that it was knocked down during the study session from full-time to part-time, but if it's going to be a majority project job like scanning,
right,
that's something to me we should be outsourcing rather than hiring someone to do, because that's not a $25 an hour job. That's pay another vendor to do a job. So I think overall, I'm leery of the staffing, as I have been for years. I don't necessarily agree with the some of the staffing being added, or even the impacts with the questions asked tonight aren't clear that it's going to have a positive overall impact. Like it'll help out here or there, but no one can quantify it, and that's kind of a why question. Everything we got up to this point was we used to have this many people. That's how it's been for years, is we used to have this many people. Or when our tax revenue was this amount, we used to have this many people. It's never a why we need these people. So when I don't get a why we need something, it kind of sets off a red flag to me of, is this a we would like or a we really need? And some of this sounds like a we would like. There's other projects in here that I don't agree with, like at the current cost of the building department window, and we've discussed that a bit, but that stuff comes back to us to vote on in the future as we get proposals. The staffing doesn't. As soon as this gets approved, you guys are free to go higher. So for that reason, I'm a no vote on this tonight, as I haven't heard why we really need these. It's more of a, it'll help, but we can't quantify how, and that is not super reassuring to me. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Resnick.
Thank you, Mayor. I do support the budget, and I do believe that Ms. Stamper made a very good argument at the budget session of why we needed a full-time position for that. I think what we're all forgetting is that we have pending retirements coming up, and not just one, right? And by having somebody grow into that position at a much lower salary rate is a good thing, right? Because then they're getting used to our system and the systems that we use for finance. And I was disappointed that we could not reach consensus on the full-time position for the finance department. I think Ms. Stamper did a very good argument in that regard. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that we really need to keep our eye on local roads. We've got the millage expiring in November of 2025, and when I think back, the 1.15 for the local roads program was enacted back when it was about $1 million a lane mile for new pave, right? And I remember we went for the SAW grant with HRC at that time to do the West Road 1 mile, and it was $2 million, right? And it actually came a little bit over that by the time we funded it. But those costs are now at $3 million a lane mile, and we see just from the discussion that we'll have pretty soon here on the safety path, it's almost $1 million per safety path mile now, right? So we really need to keep our eye on that and take a look, because we do have roads that are crumbling, and we appreciate the work Mr. Sigma has done to try to move up some of Potter Road's repairs as well. So let's not forget that as we go into next fiscal year. So thank you.
Anybody else? I too can support this budget. In regards to the DPW position, I think it will eliminate some overtime hours, but it's hard to speculate how many hours it's going to save us. But what it will do for us is keep our downtown area clean. On Tuesday nights after Thursday nights after concerts, every garbage bin is full. Instead of having somebody work and pay overtime, we can have this person come in during regular hours on Friday and get things cleaned up and ready to go. So there we could probably be saving some money, and they'll be keep doing the upkeep and keeping our city clean for our residents. And I've heard that from people that you can't use the garbage can in front of Alex's after a concert because it's full and stuff like that. Well, it doesn't get taken care of for a couple of days. Now it'll get taken care of the next day, according to the agreements with services that we have. And I don't think it's never the intention of the city to get back to the number of employees that we had 10 years ago, 12 years ago, but we cut back on employees. And now with the gain of residents and all the growth in this city, there's added responsibilities to all the jobs. And I think that's what we need to look at is, do we have enough people to do the jobs adequately, so when a citizen comes in to the building department, they get taken care of on a timely manner. We get the permits done. When they come into the treasurer's office to pay their taxes or whatever, or if they have a question about it. I think that's what we need to look at when we're adding these employees. It's not, we had 64 back in 2004 and now we're trying to get there. No, I just think we're trying to get to a level where we can provide the services. We do that with the police department now. The cadets, we bring the cadets up. There's been a number of retirements in the police department this year. If we didn't have that program, where would we be right now? Same with the fire department. The firemen have, the part-timers are now lieutenants. They've gained positions and things like that. And that's what I think we got to look at, is we got to look at, do we have enough manpower to provide the citizens the services that they shall need and that they shall get for their tax dollars. So with that, I've got a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to approve the fiscal year 2023-2024 budget and adoption of the requisite budget resolutions. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Mayor Beagle?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Resnick?
Aye.
Councilmember Behrman?
Yes.
Councilmember Gotcho?
No.
Councilmember Grunland Fox?
Yes.
Councilmember Sharp?
Aye.
Councilmember Smiley?
Yes.
6 yes, 1 no.
Thank you. And that concludes the unfinished business portion of tonight's meeting. We'll move on to new business. New business number 1 is a recommendation to adopt a memorandum of understanding and cooperative services agreement between the City of Wixom and the Wixom Downtown Development Authority for service cost sharing for the period of July 1, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Very good. Mr. Benson?
Thank you,
With us
Mayor.
tonight, too, we have the chairperson for the DDA, Russ Meredith, to answer questions, too.
And Executive Director Cloutier did intend to be here. She had a conflict that she could not reschedule, so we will be covering in her absence on this particular item. This memorandum of understanding is very similar to the one that City Council and the DDA mutually adopted last year, which was the first year we had implemented kind of a formal structure for general services cost sharing. I would say the majority of it follows the same methodology of that 5% of the cost of specific areas, whether that's finance, the city manager's office, public works general operations, for all of the work that those departments do to serve the residents within the downtown district. We came to that number. Just to remind everyone, that 5% was that the DDA is about 5% of the total land mass, 5% of the total taxable value of the city, and those were kind of the framework for which how we came to 5%. So that stays the same, 5% of the budgeted cost for those areas. It also includes 50% of the annual budgeted cost for community service programs that are held within the downtown district, including the Light the Night event, Hot Blues and Barbecue, as well as the annual concert series and other things. So again, opportunities for the DDA to contribute to the things happening within their district. The primary difference in this MOU, which has increased the DDA's contribution to the city, is obviously the addition of funding the cost of a full-time heavy equipment operator in the Public Works Department, both in terms of salary as well as the fringe benefits. That comes out to, we estimate, $86,000 and some change for fiscal year 22-23 or 23-24. Total cost in this is $250,339. This particular memorandum of understanding went to the DDA board this morning, and they approved it. Given how much we've already talked about this on both sides of the coin, we felt comfortable having it also in your packet tonight, considering we were looking at the budget. The MOU does add a little bit of detail in terms of what the kind of expectations or scope of services included for that heavy equipment operator, what the DDA and the district should expect to see in exchange for that funding contribution. The last thing I'll mention is, given that funding an employee is a larger commitment than just a one-year agreement, this agreement what is designed so that the funding for the heavy equipment operator can only be terminated either at the end of the DDA plan, right? If you all choose not to extend the DDA plan, the agreement becomes moot anyways, or with mutual agreement between the DDA and City Council that that particular portion of cost sharing would change. So we tried to build in a little bit more, I'll say, certainty and stability from City Council's perspective to feel comfortable that this is not a one-time funding arrangement for what is an ongoing expense. With that in mind, if you have any questions, I would be happy to address them.
Councilmember Brennan Fox.
Will this position work the same hours as the rest of the DPW staff, or will they be on some type of split schedule?
They would operate the same. It's not a specific person designated to the DDA. It's just the amount of the addition of one person to the overall pool. So there will likely be multiple DDA or DPW employees who actually do these specific tasks. We didn't want to get to this position of Jim is the DDA guy, so he has to do all of their work. We didn't want to kind of hamstring that.
So it'll depend on the day's assignments, basically. And what are the hours that this person will work? Is it 7 to 4:30?
7 to 5.
7 to 5, Monday through Thursday?
There again, it's either Monday through Thursday or Tuesday through Friday.
So we have that flexibility.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor.
So it's basically 40 hours a week. It may not be 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, but it's 40 hours a week. And a lot of detail in the DDA description of what that person will be doing. But in my mind, when I read it, I'm thinking, well, that's what they're doing now. And maybe not quite to everyone's satisfaction, but the list of jobs is basically, so I thought, you know, do we really need another person again? But then I read the next paragraph down says there's also DDA reserves the right to ask for additional services within that 40 hours or whatever. I know it might be 80 hours one week, 0 hours the next week kind of thing, right? We're all going to play nice together and make sure what needs to be done in the DDA gets done in the DDA. But I guess my whole point goes back to a question that Councilmember Gottschall asked about overtime, and I feel like Director Sickma, you're essentially getting another person in your department, and you need to provide 40 hours of the DDA, but you're already providing some to the DDA in current situation, even if we didn't hire. So whatever those hours were, you're now gaining back into your portfolio of potential work that you can get done. So the expectation would be directionally there'll be a reduction in overtime. I know we got emergencies, plowing that happens at 2 in the morning and whatever, but I just think that it's the right thing to do to hire somebody else. I just hope all departments play nice together. We've had some issues in the past with departments not communicating really well, let's say, and getting things done that they think need to be done, or not doing them correctly, or whatever the case may be. But let's move forward, and hopefully we'll have those trash cans emptied after the concerts on Friday morning. But that still doesn't help the problem of Thursday night after the concert. They're still full. Unless we put more out or something. Anyway, I'm just kind of rambling now. Thank you.
Councilmember Gottschall.
Thank you. Sounds like we need bigger trash cans. I get, so the breakdown is what you provided last year as well, that this percentage of the total kind of size of the city and this and that. One question that came to mind though is, of all of the potential taxes collected from the DDA, what proportion of that is collected by the DDA board compared to the city? Does that make sense? So of all the taxes from all the lots in the DDA, that's the whole pie basically, and because it's through TIF, the city isn't collecting all of that, it's through the DDA board. What percentage, do you know what percentage that the DDA gets rather than it coming to the city of that bunch?
I have not updated the numbers. We did, you may recall, we did I'd say pretty extensive kind of analysis of that. Last year it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 95% of the capture goes directly to the DDA because of the increase in values. And that actually was by design, right? The bond payments that the DDA had required that they collect on taxes on otherwise undeveloped property. So their capture on the majority really of that district is on property that was undeveloped and had no infrastructure, significantly less value. So it's significant.
Which it's higher than many typical DDAs because of that, because there's usually a beginning point where the DDA area is pretty well developed, and now it's just to the extent that you succeed in attracting more development and you generate additional taxable value capture, that's where you collect the money, and ours is a bit unique from the standpoint of there was not much there when it was established, and certainly the residential was not what it was today, and that's where most of the revenue is coming in for the DDA, and that's where that number, I don't recall the number specifically.
It was in the 90s. Yeah, it's pretty substantial. But the same thing also applies to our capture on the county's millages, actually the library's millage, all the other millages we get. It's the exact same thing. It's in the 90%. It's the same as with the city. So, you know, that was the genesis of this originally, was that, you know, there are a lot of residents, there are a lot of basic city services needed that need to be provided in the district, and we tried to come up with a methodology that didn't hamstring the DDA, but also gave the city the resources that, you know, it needs to service, you know, the basic service pieces, while still recognizing that the point of the DDA is to kind of pool money together and make improvements to the district that then build on themselves to attract more development, more increases, you know, self-perpetuating, if that makes sense.
Have we discussed or thought at all, rather than tying this to like what square mileage they make up of the city and everything, to the portion, like that proportion of 90 whatever % that they're collecting? Have we?
So there's a bit of an issue with getting that specific, because what you can do with cities and really, you know, anyone who's contributing, you can set what percentage of the total capture is collected, right? It does, right now it's 100%. All taxing jurisdictions give 100%. When we established the DDA, there weren't as many ways around that. Nowadays there are. So as an example, the county's policy on new TIF districts and expansions, renewals, they go down to 75% capture, so they still get a quarter of kind of that new increment, so that they get to keep more out of it. These TIF districts keep less. But that really requires kind of an amendment to the plan itself, because, you know, the nice thing about this scenario is we don't have to amend the plan, we don't have to kind of open the plan up, but it allows us to kind of be reimbursed for services we're providing directly to, you know, the district or to the organization itself.
And to connect those dots, if you were to make that change, that would open us up to the county reducing it from 100% to 75%.
Yeah.
Or some other percentage.
With the increase, I guess just two other questions. Since our DDA taxpayers are paying an additional millage right now, is that anything, like, I know when the original plan was put into place, and you can share what the correct number is, but I think it had to be something like the 3 times, there's something about 3 times the amount that was being collected. If we were to reduce that extra DDA millage, would we still be within that if we wanted to help give a tax break to taxpayers in the district?
I would have to look at it. If I'm going directly off millage rates, right, the city's total millage rate is now under 12. At the time, back in 2003, it was probably around 12. The county's total captures, I believe, 4 something mills. So we're probably right around it. I think we needed that additional 1 point whatever mills to get to that 3 times mark. I guess we'd have to look at it, but again, that's another scenario that really has to be addressed through, you know, an update, an extension, or amendment to the plan.
And the plan ends, is it 2027?
Yes.
Okay. And with this amount, Mr. Chairman, what is the DDA left over with as your operating balance for the year?
I apologize, I don't have that number.
Okay.
It's their total budget, their total revenues are just over 1.3 million.
So still over $1 million.
Correct. And then I think the bond payments are in the 450,000s, and that 460,000. So they otherwise, you know, operate, although mostly it's contributions to capital projects.
600,000 or 700,000-ish left over.
Yeah, I think from a functional perspective, they operate on 200,000, 300,000. And the rest goes to either contributions to capital or operating, bond payments, otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
Sir. Deputy Mayor Resnick.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple things. One is, I think we need to pay special attention to a couple points, and that is now that phase 2 of the Michigan Airline Trail is open. I know last year we had some issues where the weeds got knee high, and it was very unsightly for, I think it was during the July, August months. So I think if we concentrate on that as one of the primary things, as well as the trash receptacle emptying. My son will thank you for this because he empties 2 or 3 of them on his own and throws them in his dumpster. on a regular basis, a weekly basis, so he'll thank you for this. So those two areas, and if we have to be flexible in terms of the work days, during the concert season, I think Friday morning is going to be important to get that all cleaned up, because those are always overflowing after a concert. But thank you.
Anybody else? All right, seeing none, I got excuse me, a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to adopt the memorandum of understanding and cooperative services agreement between the City of Wixom and the Wixom Downtown Development Authority for service cost sharing for the period of July 1, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. New business number 2 is a recommendation to adopt a resolution proposing a charter amendment authorizing the levy of .03 mils for the construction, maintenance, and repair of safety paths and sidewalks for 15 years, effective July 1, 2024. Do I have a motion?
Support.
Mr. Benson.
Gosh, they put me all 3 in a row. Thank you. So in your agenda packet, we have a resolution that's prepared by the City Attorney's Office to get the conversation going on ballot language to renew the .3 millage for safety path funding. Past millage was for 15 years. The language before you tonight would be for an extension of another 15 years. So just an extension, not an increase. We included in the agenda packet a number of kind of examples or exhibits to sort of overview, where this can be used, where kind of the key areas going forward to look at are. As I think Councilmember Resnick mentioned earlier, there are still kind of long sections and a lot of things to look at in the agenda packet. Those areas are on the map are in yellow. And then we also attempted to put together, I call these at best rough numbers for what you could expect, how much it may cost to fill in all of those gaps that still exist. The original intent and continued intent of this millage is to close sidewalk gaps, improve pedestrian connectivity throughout Wixom. The factor of $175 per square foot or per linear foot, across all of these. That number also is intended to reflect that easement acquisition is an important part of this process, and so that kind of inflates the average. Foot may not cost $175 to install, but all told, when you have all of the work that goes into it. So we tried to give you an understanding of what that work may look like. I'm sure Public Works Director Sigma can talk about kind of what we've done and what the kind of focus is going forward. That's also included in our capital improvement plan that you all approved earlier tonight. With that, happy to answer any additional questions you may have about what we've presented here.
Councilmember Behrman.
Thank you. I guess the only question I had was in the administrative summary. It said that the current one ends in June of 23, and the new one would be starting in July of 24, so it almost looks like we skipped a year. Was that just a typo? I hope we didn't skip a year.
It'll end.
The third paragraph.
It ends with this. It basically ends in this upcoming budget cycle and we restarted.
Yeah, that may have been a typo.
Okay, so we're not skipping. We're doing this in time. We didn't miss out on a year of capture. That's what I wanted to.
No,
that's correct.
Okay, that the only thing that I wasn't abundantly clear on. It looked like in the millage expiration chart we were fine, but I wasn't sure with the administration summary.
No, I apologize for that. That was my fault.
Okay, well, I'm in support of it. I just wanted to clear up my confusion.
Councilmember Gaccio.
Thank you. A few questions here. The first with the map. At the northeast, we have yellow, which is proposed safety path and sidewalk, which appears to be Gilbert Willis, maybe?
Yes.
What is, we're saying pave in Gilbert Willis?
Yeah, so along, I'm sorry, Tim, what road is that?
Glengarry.
Glengarry, yes. So that is we actually have some pathways out there already. There are some gaps that still need to be filled along Hickory Hill. That's the other part of that. The western square is Gilbert Willis. The eastern square is Hickory Hill Golf Course. Commerce Township has talked to us. They'd like to improve Glengarry as a whole, and they're responsible for those sections. So we were just kind of filling in what needs to be improved. There are some gaps there.
The bike path goes, the current paved path goes from behind Gilbert Willis, and it's paved all the way. So I guess, like, it's paved behind the golf course. I guess, looking at the map, I'm confused about what this is paving that isn't paved, because it's all paved, or the vast majority of behind Gilbert Willis is already paved.
Yeah, so it's our understanding is that some of those portions along the city's northern border, it has not been paved, and we're just trying to interconnect all those pieces to make sure it's one contiguous spot all the way down through Glengarry.
With Commerce Township, I've had multiple conversations with Supervisor Larry Gray from Commerce Township about his desire to make a connection with some new subdivisions that have come along in a hole that exists in his side of things, if you will, along Glengarry. And it really just connects into the park, and there's a section that's included there that's currently not connected to other paths, and that's what he's asking for there. He's talking about doing the engineering for it, and just providing a fee for us if we're amenable to it on a per foot basis to complete that connection and just add to the overall safe path network for both communities. That's, I think, specifically the item that you're asking about, and that's the specific section. I think it was 500 feet.
Yeah, that particular line may not be perfectly accurate. I will fully admit that was a late addition to this map, but we, as a whole, just kind of backing this up, the intent of the map, I don't know that in the next 15 years we certainly couldn't fill all of those gaps. What we were attempting to do is to really point out where there are gaps, just to give the kind of overarching picture of how in the city of Wixom, how are our pedestrian connections, and where are the areas we need to look at. So
and the main focus there, when you flip the page to the cost schedule, if you will, where it lists these individual pieces, it totals up to $8.75 million. The proposed 15-year collections with a 3% inflationary factor every year collects just under $5 million. So that's just to show that we have expenditures that we could potentially utilize the revenue for that would be greater than the revenue collected underneath the millage. So it just shows that we have the work to do, and that's, as Drew mentioned, we may or may not get to all of those pieces, but if we were to, we project a cost of an additional $3.75 million beyond the revenue collected from the millage. That's really the main purpose of it.
I think it's been a long time since I rode my bike on that path, but that's been paved since I was in high school.
The section going east is very much disrepair, though. There's a couple areas there.
Yeah, but it's in yellow as if it's not there at all, which I'm sure adds to our projected cost, because then I would imagine it's easier to repair than to create new. So
again, I don't think the drawing's exactly accurate as to what we're speaking of.
So like the missing part is the only part of it that isn't drawn, and the rest of it should be blue, I guess. But that's just something that jumped out at me as being odd, because I know that's been paved for well over 10 years. I think in looking at the actual ballot language, though, there's the first use of the word inclusive does not make any sense to me. It says the millage was for 15 years, 2009 through 2023 inclusive. So I think that first inclusive should be removed. I don't think a voter is going to read that and remotely understand why it's in there. And then secondly, I'd like to make a motion to add language making this up to 0.3 mil for 15 years, rather than saying that it must be 0.3 mils. I don't really think that we'll need a full amount for 15 years. I'd like to give future councils the flexibility, if we can tax our residents less, to tax them less. So that's a formal motion.
Support.
Or
Any comments on the Deputy Mayor Resnick?
I think the chart points out the fact that the total tax capture for that 15 years is $4.9 million, and the total cost at today's cost of laying that asphalt is over 8. So I'm in support of keeping it, or I would support the original motion of 0.3 mils. Not a single resident showed up today to protest this. It was such a big issue on the 0.3 mils, so I'm in support of keeping the original one.
Councilmember Berman?
I agree with the up to language in our operational millage of us trying to keep our budget down. But this specific millage, I don't think putting up to language in it would be a fair representation to our residents of what we're looking to do, because we've spent this money for the last 15 years and we have so much more work to do. And even if we were to fill in all these yellow gaps, we're going to have to start fixing the blue gaps that are going to be 30 years old. So I think we're kidding ourselves if we're ever going to levy less than 0.3, and there's no reason for us to put something in front of our residents that's not truthful. We're going to be levying 0.3, and we clearly have enough work to do. Then let's leave it as is. I think our residents have supported the safety path millage in the past, and I really hope they support it moving forward, but there's no reason in my mind to amend it as proposed.
Councilmember Sharp?
Thank you, Mayor. So the language varies throughout this presentation today. There's 3 different places where we have today's budget, which is actually 0.294. It isn't even at 0.3. And in the official submittal of our budget, the words say not more than 0.3 for no more than 15 years. And then in the management summary, it says not to exceed 0.3. So I think saying the words up to 0.3 is consistent with the language we've already read preparing for this meeting. And it gives flexibility. There may be years where we don't use it, we don't do any path work because we don't have contractors or we have another COVID or something like that. It just gives us the flexibility to address potential hard times and reduce taxes, and everybody comes out ahead. Now, I understand we also want to build up the reserves for a year where we have more than expected, but we also have $5 million in the general fund that could get us through to the next year if we needed to. I wanted to thank Marilyn Stamper and Drew Benson. I sent a late note last night, like 11 o'clock, asking for a summary of what have we collected to date for the last 15 years, and then what have we spent. And it turns out we're about net zero. Whatever we've collected, we've spent. So that's a good sign, but we also don't always collect exactly 0.3. It's been under 0.3, including 23-24 budget. We're planning under 0.3. So I don't see any reason we can't say up to 0.3 as the motion suggests. Thank you.
Just for clarity on the lesser amount than 0.3, that's due to Headley override factors that are imposed on us by the Headley amendment, not
whatever
decisions from the city. That's not a discretionary decision.
And just as professionals say, please don't interrupt when somebody's talking. You can state your opinion afterwards, but don't interrupt somebody in the middle of their conversation. Councilmember Gatchel.
Thank you. I guess the opposition to up to is that we want to tax people no matter what. And so your fear is that it's lying to residents. It isn't. It's allowing us to tax us if we can, which would be a good thing. No one is confused about what the words up to mean, so it also means it could be 0.3 from here on out. So I don't, I guess, fully understand the opposition reasoning to this of it's good the way it is. That it's good the way it is to this council. We will not all be here 15 years from now, guaranteed. So who knows what future councils will want to do. Maybe they'll decide sidewalks are pointless, but they'll be looped into having to tax people for this, even though they're not going to do anything about it. I think a larger part of where my mentality comes from is we really need to reevaluate our game plan on these. I think it's a little bit redundant to have long sidewalks that we have to maintain on both sides of every road. We can just put in crosswalks and then people can use the side that has a sidewalk. I think that's a very sensible solution. Our sidewalks are not flooded with foot traffic and bike traffic, necessitating having sidewalks on both sides of the road. We can make easy crossings and do it in a safe way where there is some sidewalk on both sides until you get to a crosswalk. I think in looking at this, I mean, I found the Gilbert Willis thing. I don't think that's completely accurate. Living near the Highgates, seeing that bit that we want to do on the south side of Loon Lake Road at Highgate on the Green, everyone walks through their part and then uses a crosswalk to the north side of the road and walks down that side. I really don't think we need to do that section. We just save money by crossing that up. I think there's genuine ways, same with Potter Road. Everyone already uses the south side of Potter Road and no one complains that there's not a sidewalk on the north side. I think reasonably we can reevaluate exactly what we need to accomplish to give sidewalks to our residents, and it's not going to involve filling in all this yellow with blue. I think it's unreasonable to add that kind of a burden to the city in the future of needing to maintain and replace all of that stuff when it's not heavily used. It's the same thing kind of, we talked about signage and having an arch over the loop, or what we're calling the loop now. Why do we need an archway? Why do we even need signs? People see there's a path there, they can go walk on it. It's kind of irrelevant and redundant, and I don't understand why up to is scary to people. I don't know. I made the motion because obviously I support it. I don't understand the logic behind not supporting it. So, thank you.
Councilmember Smiley?
I'm uncomfortable with being guaranteed we won't all be here in 15 years. Somebody will be here, right? The up to edition has been successful in the past. I do like the idea of giving some flexibility to future councils, no matter who they might be. Hey, this isn't a make or break it for me. I mean, the 0.3 mils has been going on for 15 years without an up to in it. My only concern is that, is this the precedent we're going to set for all millages that you can add in an up to for future councils to be in control of? And maybe that's not a bad thing. I just, I haven't really, thought about the long-term implications of that to all of our, but it's certainly, I certainly like the flexibility that's put in, and it's been successful with our general millage. So I'll go along with it for now. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, I got a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to adopt a resolution proposing a charter amendment authorizing the levy of up to 0.3 mils.
No, so this is just for the amendment.
Okay, so we're not just voting on the amendment to up to 3 mils. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, no,
Yep. So this is just.
Vote on the amendment first and then
Up
we vote on
to, okay, we're voting on the amendment to up to 3 mils. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
No.
Deputy Mayor Resnick?
Nay.
Councilmember Behrman?
No.
Councilmember Gatchel.
Yes.
Councilmember Brendan Fox.
Yes.
Councilmember Sharp.
Aye.
Councilmember Smiley.
Yes.
Mayor Beagle.
No.
4 yes, 3 no.
So now we go. Councilman Gatchel?
Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, that was just on the up to. I did have another, I guess, question. I don't know maybe if anyone here can answer it, but being that we get these Headley rollbacks and other cities have done Headley override ballot questions with other taxes, like, Berkeley, I think recently did a Headley override and a number of other cities. Is there any way to insert language into the ballot question that just says, like, regardless of Headley rollback, it shall be? You can't do that?
No.
Okay. That was just a procedural question, because it'd be nice if we could. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilmember Smiley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What happened to, do we have to do another one of these amendments for this word inclusive that Councilman Gatchel brought up?
Inclusive?
It does, I agree that it's clunky, but we didn't really,
If it's just removing a word, I think we could just.
Motion to remove the first inclusive.
I'm not saying that just yet.
There's a second one as well, and that's one of the clarifications I was going to ask you for.
Oh, I'm talking about the one
Well, they just
after
did
the year 2023, comma, inclusive.
Yep. The first sentence.
I'm not even sure what that means. No, I'm sorry.
Including 2020.
But so does through 2023.
Yeah, it does. I think it's a word Councilman Gatchel used too redundant, but, is it easier if we just say amend it?
You know what, it's probably, it's not a bad idea to have the motion to amend this resolution to say that, just,
Well, since
I don't know that it's necessary, but.
Well, I think how it
Sorry.
reads is important to,
Yeah.
to the voter. And it's awkward if nothing else, even if it's correct. Do you want to consult with the lawyers that wrote this to make sure
Honestly,
it's okay?
given the timing, I think we would rather have this done, if possible, right? You don't have to approve anything, but to have the language approved tonight would be kind of the best case scenario. If you didn't feel comfortable, we could table and bring it back, but for something like that, I think it would be completely safe to just make a motion to, make that amendment, assuming it's been approved.
I'll steal Council Gotchaman's thunder and I'll do a proposal that or an amendment that we remove the word inclusive.
Second.
Do I have to say the second use of it?
Just the first sentence.
The first instance of the word inclusive be removed from the language.
Support.
Any
What
discussion?
information, subject to legal counsel's approval? Can we add that to the motion?
Is there time? I mean, that's
sure.
perfectly reasonable, but subject to
Legal review.
legal counsel's approval.
That was on my mind with the first one, frankly. So I would like to have that included this time around, so at least we're covered that way. If there's any kind of a concern from the legal counsel standpoint, then we can address it.
Sure.
Any discussion?
But I mean, its status as a renewal, frankly, is what I'm speaking of.
Deputy Mayor Resnick?
Oh, I got you.
I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but in a legal sense, inclusive does mean something. It means includes 2028, right? I mean, if you said 2013 through 2028, you can interpret it as January 2028. Inclusive is used, at least in my understanding of contracts, for a purpose.
Councilmember Gatchel?
I guess it literally says 2009 through 2023, not up to 2023 or through January 2023. That's why it's just an odd, I think we're kind of, I don't know of a resident that's gonna read that and says, yes, inclusive there makes total sense to me. They're gonna read it and be confused. We wanna make these as easy to understand for voters as possible. So I think it's not necessary to have that inclusive in there.
Yeah.
Any other comments? All right, I have a motion to remove the first inclusive pending legal opinion. I guess that's going to be proper. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Councilmember Behrman,
Yes.
Councilmember Gaccho,
Yes.
Councilmember Grenlin Fox,
Yes.
Councilmember Sharp,
No.
Councilmember Smiley,
Yes.
Mayor Beagle,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Resnick,
Nay.
5 yes, 2 no.
Now I have a motion on the table to recommend to adopt the resolution proposing a charter amendment authorizing the levy of up to 0.3 mils for the construction, maintenance, and repair of safety path and sidewalks for 15 years effective July 1, 2024. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the motion carries. New business number 3 is a recommendation to adopt a community development block grant urban county qualification resolution for years 2024, 2025, and 2026. Do I have a motion?
Support?
Ms. McGee?
Good evening.
Good evening.
This is a basic report. It's pretty much standard. HUD requires Oakland County to renew cooperative agreements with their participating communities every 3 years. As a current participant, there's a cooperation participation agreement between the City of Wixon and Oakland County on file. It renews automatically for each 3-year cycle as long as council adopts the resolution.
Any questions? Are we sure? I got a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to adopt the community development block grant urban county qualification resolutions for the year 2024, 2025, and 2026. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? New business number 4 is a recommendation to adopt the resolution approving participation in the Oakland County 2023 interim local transportation reimbursement program and authorize City Manager Stephen Brown to complete all associated processes on behalf of the city. Do I have a motion?
We'll move.
Support.
Very good. City Manager Brown?
Yeah, so I wanted to go over a few of the main points from my report to talk about what was involved here. We had the Oakland County wide transportation millage that was put before voters at the November 8th, 2022 ballot. That millage addressed several existing service models that were in place across the county, including the Suburban Mobility Authority for Regional Transportation, North Oakland Transportation Authority, the West Oakland Transportation Authority, and the Older Persons Commission in Rochester Hills. That millage was passed countywide, and because of that, now we're looking at how to implement that, or the county's looking at how to implement that across Oakland County and improve public transportation service options for the residents of Oakland County across the county. Early on, the communities that we have something in common with, i.e. those that utilize People's Express to provide our local transit service, banded together because we were concerned about this, because I mentioned all of those organizations that were included in the millage. People's Express was not one of those organizations that was included in that millage, and we have existing transit service that we provide to people that essentially wouldn't be covered by the millage. We wouldn't be reimbursed for those expenses unless we brought it to somebody's attention to try to bring that kind of expense reimbursement about. So we had to have multiple meetings with the 7 communities that are involved with People's Express, and then we reached out to Oakland County to have discussions about that to try to bring about a situation where we could be reimbursed for those expenses. I'm happy to say that we've been successful on that front. There's some nuances and details that are concerning to me, but there is now a Oakland County 2023 interim local transportation reimbursement program that is being proposed to be accepted from you tonight. That was prepared by Oakland County, that would put together a pool of about $500,000 that the communities that were involved with PEX had originally hoped would be for the 7 communities involved with People's Express, because our total of expenditures is in that ballpark. Unfortunately, some of the details that came out was that it was expanded to 20 communities across Oakland County now, not just the 7 that had partnerships with People's Express. But by the same token, there were things that we've learned since then as well, that municipal credits will continue, because we were kind of questioning whether that was going to be the case or not. And with the municipal credits being involved and still receiving those from SMART, potentially $500,000 might work. So we were, again, still concerned about that, had additional meetings with Oakland County and talked about it further and brought up the fact that what about if it's not sufficient? And we've had verbal assurances from various county representatives that if that is the case, the intent is for you to be reimbursed for your justifiable expenses for the level of transit service that you're providing. So we had assurances that they would be okay with exceeding that $500,000 as it became necessary. There might be additional county action that would have to take place, but they would be open to that. The other concern about the sufficiency of those funds is the fact that we're already experiencing spikes in ridership with People's Express right now, because of the fact people have heard this millage is passed, expecting that there'd be greater transportation services available. Maybe they're more aware of those transportation services. And our numbers are going up by 25 to 30% in the city over the first 3 quarters of 2023. So we also brought up that concern. So again, assurances were provided by the county that if it is exceeded, as long as there's not some change in program or change in the services provided, that they would handle the increase in transportation that was resulting from the additional usage of the services because of just word of mouth. And then secondly, if something worked out where the math wasn't working out, they'd be open to providing additional reimbursement agreements later on. So what's before you tonight is the okay to authorize participation in this local transportation reimbursement program that I mentioned already. There's an online application that would have to be filled out. You're authorizing me as the city manager to complete all associated processes in conjunction with this, including that application, signing of any agreements and things of that nature, because a lot of that is TBD, to be determined right now. So it's left for me to complete the associated processes, assuming you're in favor of us participating in this program and getting reimbursed for the transit services that we do provide and have historically provided. You might well have some questions on that, but I wanted to cover it from a basic standpoint. If there's anything you'd like to ask me, I'll do my best to answer it based on the information gathered from the county and our partner communities.
Councilmember Berman.
Thank you. So historically speaking, we opted out of the transit millage and then provided these services to our residents on our own dime.
We use the municipal credits to some extent, and then also our own dime if there was monies necessary beyond that.
And now, because the transit millage passed, how much is Oakland County collecting from our residents? Maybe this is more of a Maryland question.
I believe it's right around 800,000, just a little over 800,000.
And we're concerned that they're not going to give us 500 back of the 800 they're getting.
Well, that 500,000 is not for the city of Wixom. That's
well, I understand that. That
was one of the points that we made.
That's why we objected to it in the beginning.
Yeah, that's one of the points that we made repeatedly to the county. In Wixom alone, I said it more than once. In Wixom alone, you're going to collect far more than $500,000. So if we have expenditures beyond $500,000, I would think we'd be open to that. They have verbally agreed to that, as I mentioned.
I'm totally fine with this us going after getting reimbursed. And it's a head scratcher to me that why they wouldn't if they're still making money on us, but here it is.
And I should have said one more thing. This is subject to a better mousetrap, if you will, for public transportation in Oakland County. In the interim, until that is determined, or if something like that is built, until then, in the meanwhile, we at least wanted to be reimbursed for these expenses, because it doesn't make sense for us to continue to pay those expenses while you're collecting multiple millions of dollars from the 7 communities that are involved here. So that's why we were fighting for this reimbursement. I should have provided that as well.
Thank you.
To answer your question is another conversation in another day. Any questions? Councilmember Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. So when you say reimbursed, it feels like the taxpayers in Wixom are getting double taxed. One is to go to the city of Wixom's tax coffers, and we use that to pay People's Express, and the other is going to Oakland County to pay for something we're not even getting. So when we get reimbursed, it's not we, the city, it's we, the taxpayers. Is there we're going to give that money back to the taxpayers, or where's that going to go? Just in our general fund, and then maybe we can reduce our PAT millage down to 0.25 or something. Bills.
No, I don't see where that's the.
Do you see my point, though, about it? When we say we get reimbursed, it's me.
Yeah, that's sort of what
It's everybody up here. I see 16,000. I don't know how much we think we're going to actually get. That wasn't really clear. We said 75,000 in there, and then 16,000. We don't really know. It'd be 500,000 split up amongst 20 communities, right? So that's
the city. We're projecting what we've currently budgeted. I believe was like 45,000 for the upcoming fiscal year, and as I mentioned, that didn't reflect some of this 25 to 30% increase. So I've talked with the county about this, and what I would be putting in there would be in the neighborhood of $75,000 actually, which is above what we're expending right now to cover the added ridership that we're talking about experiencing. But that would then be less the municipal credits of $16,093. So it's a lot of detail about a very not that large a sum of money, but it's probably going to be that 75,000 potentially net of that 16,000 from the municipal credits. So.
Yeah,
it gives us up.
It's the directional thing again of we're paying for something we're not getting, and we're getting taxed more, and we're not getting any service for that tax, and then we get some money back. We still don't get it back.
Well, we're using tax dollars from the city of Wixom to pay for that service as it stands.
Yeah.
And we found that to be ridiculous from the standpoint of you're going to be collecting this transit tax. We shouldn't be taking that from our general fund. That should be coming from the transit tax, which is going to be a vastly increased amount over top of what we were spending already, as I mentioned. I think it was about $860,000 that we estimated originally. So if you take $860,000 minus $75,000 that we're actually going to spend, you can see right there that we're a donor agency.
When we get the check from Oakland County, because I did notice they didn't waste any time taking the money from us for this thing, that when we do get the check from them, can we notify council how much we got, and then we can talk about what we want to do with it? Throw a big party or something, put on Light the Night, and I don't know. It's windfall money.
It'll just translate to the bottom line, right? I mean, again,
I know
the alternative-
it's incremental, but it's just annoying. They 1 week after we voted on it, it was in our tax bill.
Right.
Literally.
We took a lot of questions from people about that, yes. As Marilyn can attest. And what are we going to be getting for this? And at the beginning of it, at least, we would be getting reimbursed for our expenses instead of taking it from the taxpayer dollars collected from the city of Wixom. It'll come from the taxpayer dollars collected from the transit village at least.
Yeah.
Can I add just one positive note?
I'll stand down, but I'll try to figure out how to remind myself to ask about it in 6 months to see if we've got it.
We can give you a report on it. We'll see how it comes out. I should mention, there's two different.
But bottom line, I support going to get it. Don't get me wrong. We definitely, I'll vote yes on the.
It's biannual, if you will. So 6 months worth of expenses will be an ask, and another 6 months of expenses will be an ask. So we'll have two different submissions. So it'll be about 6 months out before we find out what we quote unquote receive or get.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Gatchel?
Thank you. Have they committed to this being an ongoing thing, or is this just a 1 year and then we're going to have to argue about it again?
That's the second one. It is not going to continue beyond this 1 year because the potential exists for there to be a greater transportation program already in place at the county level. I think that's very optimistic for that to be considered to be the case.
That's why I asked.
Right. So, and I think reasonable people can agree on that, and we'll see. I would be both shocked and appreciative of the fact that they could roll out a full transportation program that replaces this in 1 year's time. I'd be amazed and appreciative. But if there isn't, we'll have to go back and revisit this. You are correct. It's a 1 year program right now.
So in the meeting, have we had meetings with the county about this?
Yes, many.
Not about People's Express, but about their plans for the transit program. When are have they verbalized that in 2024, their plan's gonna be up and running? Or have they not been willing to put a start date on things?
I think the reason they've insisted on the 1-year thing is just because they don't know what the future is going to be, and they don't want to commit to something that becomes unnecessary, and then they have to take it back or claw it back, however you want to look at it. So they just want to have it be a 1-year program, and then we'll address it again from there would be the expectation. So nobody's made a promise that, you know, January 1st of 2024, we're going to have an operating new system of transportation countywide. But by the same token, they don't want to extend it beyond 1 year until they determine what the lay of the land is at that point in time, I guess is how I would put it, if that makes sense.
If ever there was a millage that should have had up to language in it, it was this Ponzi scheme. Because right now, they're stealing money from Wixom taxpayers to pay for Southeast County bus riders, which is mind-blowing to me. So that I don't know. That it's odd that we're going to have to argue about this every year because they're not going to be ready next year with the plan, and Wixom will never get $800,000 worth of any sort of transit system. So
a bus stop.
A bus stop, it better have some very nice benches in it and some heaters for the winter.
I think Drew was going to say something a few minutes ago about on the positive side.
Yeah, the only upshot I have for you is on the bright side, the DDA does capture about $50,000 out of that new millage that does therefore stay in the city. So there's the only silver lining I have for you.
So me on a different positive.
Russ will be driving a bus next week.
On a different positive note, I think many of the communities in the outskirts of Oakland County will not be seeing things like fixed route service.
Yeah.
But happily, the city of Wixom will be seeing fixed route service according to the current proposed plans from the Suburban Mobility Authority for Regional Transportation. And I always saw one of them for sure coming. The Grand River line ended at Farmington Hills, and that's a natural extension that I saw coming, and that's going to extend into Novi and then into Wixom-Meyer. There's another route that is on 12 Mile. I'm trying to remember the number. I think it might be 450. 305 is the Grand River route, but I think it's 450 for the 12 Mile route. Don't quote me on that. That comes into Wixom as well and will be extended into Wixom down back onto Grand River where you can transfer to the Grand River line, but also ending at the Meyer in Wixom. So looking on the bright side, we're going to have 2 fixed routes that would be touching on the city of Wixom, which will be potentially service, that will be service improvements if they are put in place. And we do get questions from people asking for the ability to connect to fixed route service elsewhere in the county, which we were never able to provide because of the length of the trip. This will allow us to make those kind of connections, and that's a bright side thing at least. We'll be getting some coverage on fixed route.
I just don't know how meaningful that is, and I know we're getting into the weeds a bit, but that's not meaningful to any sliver of Wixom residents. So all of our residents, or the vast majority, except for like Helfer and Wixom Meadows, live north of Pontiac Trail, and our fixed routes will be south. So we're helping, again, we're paying $800,000 plus to help other cities. So.
Well, one thing that we talked about with the People's Express expansion, this is one of the things that they were reluctant to talk about funding an expansion of service, but the first things that we were talking about as a group with People's Express is coming up with some way to use People's Express to have some sort, maybe a fixed loop with People's Express that would allow people to connect from those neighborhood areas and get to the fixed route service. So that's something that we're looking at. Again, that's all TBD, but that's how we would try to make that connection.
I feel like we need to wait another year and start a ballot proposal to repeal this after everyone realized what a ripoff. I mean, you're paying for nothing, which is insane. So I feel like a year from now we can repeal it and everyone will be happy. So.
Yeah, where's our county commissioner this week? Any questions? All right, I got a motion and a second to approve the recommendation to adopt the resolution approving participation in the Oakland County 2023 Interim Local Transportation Reimbursement Program and authorize City Manager Stephen Brown to complete all associated processes on behalf of the city. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Moves us to new business number 5. It's a discussion of correspondence that was entered in tonight under correspondence by resident Stephanie Caldwell about the Maple Road project. Councilmember Gotcha.
Thank you. Everyone, obviously, I hope, has read this letter, and it says to be read in at the Call of the Public section of tonight's meeting. I assume that's obviously Call of the Public number 2. But one thing in reading this, I mean, it starts off complimentary that we're finally getting the road taken care of, which it did need, and it seems to be moving along at a pretty good pace. I know they said 8 weeks, and I mean, it seems like they'll be done with the surfacing portion of it in 3 weeks total, maybe. Obviously, there will be striping and other stuff that needs to get done, but at least it seems like the road should be fully drivable both directions pretty quickly. But one thing that this brought up that we've run into on other projects, whatever it was called off of the other side of Maple Road when the developer came in, I forget what they were trying to call that neighborhood, but there were communication issues there and whatnot. So one thing that came to mind as I was thinking about this, I would like, especially since we put the budget together, if we, and that's why I wanted to have a discussion to get everyone else's input, but I think it would be a wise thing from now on whenever a project is proposed to City Council, infrastructure project, or really anything that's going to impact businesses or residents, when that proposal comes to City Council, I personally think we should have a communication plan attached to it that details how we're going to get the word out to the impacted residents or business owners through what venues, and then also who will be in charge of the communication. We don't have a city PR person or communications person, so I understand how these sorts of things maybe fall through the cracks from time to time because there's a lot of people working on projects and we're not super clear on who will be doing what. But I think if we get into a habit of having a communication plan for projects like this, that will be helpful to make sure that we can avoid these sort of inconveniences for residents in the past. So my bringing up correspondence, my thoughts are more if anybody else wanted to discuss communication plans or if we'd like to see that in the future. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Resnick.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I support what Councilman Gottschall is bringing up because I also was one that turned onto the gravel portion of that last night in the dark. But the just as note, on last Friday's blast, road construction was the 8th item down the list. And I don't know how many people scrolled through all those items, but it was the 8th item. We brought this up before that Friday blast should be timely and contextual. If there's a Friday night fire or Thursday fireworks, that should be the first thing. Upcoming meetings is always front and center, and it should be the last thing, right? So I agree with Councilman Gottschall. We need to have a communications plan on any of these. Just as a note, too, I have several commercial properties in the neighboring city, and I get a newsletter every month called Know by Better Roads Ahead, and it outlines not only the city's construction programs in their local neighborhoods and roads, but also what the county, what GLEWA is doing, so Great Lakes Water Authority, as well as the state is doing in the city limits. So that might be something we'll consider as well, coming maybe from DPW. You know, this type of newsletter that's separate, so it's very pointed, and they have maps and everything else in that communication. So I agree wholeheartedly.
Councilmember Behrman.
Thank you. Just comparing and contrasting to two other projects that I counted through when we did the other side of Maple Road. There was flyers and information that went out to all the residents, and then when we did my subdivision, Maple Run, there was flyers and the engineer walked through the neighborhood. Was any of that done with I saw that from the letter there was an informational meeting done, and it was indicated that there'd be more information that was going to go out to the residents. Did that just the ball get dropped there and nothing more went out? Like I drive down Maple Road quite regularly to get out of the city now, and it seems like all the streets are clearly marked that is a one-way, and you're only going east. I mean, every street had the no left-hand turn or no right-hand turn and a one-way arrow. So signage doesn't seem to be the issue, but I mean, the fact that the school didn't know that the street was going to be closed and all the buses were late, like who did drop that ball? Was that us or was that the engineer, contractor?
I might defer to Tim on, some of the very nuanced details, but in general, that is probably a city responsibility that at some point or another, we didn't share that information in a timely way.
I mean, I agree that communication, we can always do better at communication, but I mean, the fact that the school bus is going to pick up kids, and that we owe the school system an apology for that.
In terms of Councilmember Gottschall's initial point about a communication plan, and in terms of what you're following up on, mistakes were made in terms of the communication, and I think that the proposal to have a communication plan as a means of addressing that and potentially adding additional voices to it to make sure things get thought of that maybe the initial group of people don't think of is a fine one and is a fine approach. My only quibble with the communication plan would be the timing of it. I don't think it's realistic or productive to ask for that at the time of depending on where you were coming from, the project approval or those kind of things. We need to get the engineering details figured out. We need to get the exact way we're looking to approach the project figured out. What I would propose is a period of time in advance of the project kickoff that we bring that forward for a communication plan. Is it a month before project kickoff, something like that? It would allow us time to kick it around and come up with some improvements and some refinements and those sort of things. That would be the only quibble that I have. I think it's a fine approach to coming up with a better outcome potentially on a project communication plan. I think that's a great idea. That's probably the timing that I would recommend.
Councilmember Smiley?
I guess the only follow-up I would have is, are we asking to approve anything tonight, or are we just having a consensus?
Sure.
My thought was just bring up for discussion. It's an idea that came to mind after reading this, and I know it kind of harkens back to other issues. So I like to just throw stuff out up here to take up people's time and lose bets for other people who bet on the time of meetings.
Perfectly fine with discussion as long as we're not approving anything this evening.
Yeah.
And I do hope that somebody from the city can at least reach out to the bus yard and apologize to the bus drivers to what happened.
Yeah, I don't think we need a motion or anything on this. I think we're giving city manager direction on how to proceed in the future on this. Councilmember Smiley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to talk about this during my closing comments, but I'm glad Councilman Gottschall brought it up. Actually put it here on our new business. My impression was like, oops, we let something slip through the crack. Councilman Gottschall's words again. And because I think we do a pretty good job in general of communicating with the residents, with the city, and but I suspect there's not a checks and balances type process to keep something like this from happening. So as part of a communication plan, however nebulous that might be at this moment, going forward, let's I'll leave, I think we'll leave it to administration to kind of, say how can we catch this again in the future. And we don't have to get into it too deeply, but Mr. Benson, the economic group that was put together last summer, and I know that's an ongoing project. Was this something that could be a part of that? Because that's a communication, there's a communication element to that too. Go ahead.
Yeah, one of the recommendations was at some point, to look at a communications position or some capacity, additional capacity in the city and or DDA or some combination for communications. Yes.
Yeah.
That's not something that we've actively put kind of effort into, a plan for putting more resources towards that, but yes, that was a recommendation that came out of that strategy.
And I don't, we don't need an internal social media communications person, at least to have that be their sole job. Let me put it this way: who does handle our social media? Who puts out our tweets, the Facebook, the emails that go out? Is that one person?
City manager's office handles the website, the social media communications, and the email blasts that go out along through the website. That's all handled in my own office with my administrative assistant, Cheryl Lucas, and the administrative secretary, Tina Searles.
But I want to add one thing. Most of the content they receive to be distributed comes from other departments. So they basically share over.
Oh, yeah.
And I think Steve kind of got to that earlier. That is, potentially we're a situation, whether it's a project or whether it's an individual department. That's where the communication lines can get, overlooked or otherwise. And that's not anything like DPW or Spalding to Decker on this particular project. That's, just to give you the picture.
Yeah, I prefaced all this with, I think we do a great job communicating with the residents. Something slipped through here. I'll leave it to you all to find a way to keep that from happening again.
Yeah, we've got some ideas already. I mean, I have some ideas already based on, Deputy Mayor Resnick mentioned the order of urgency. That's something that we can institute, something where that gets, we put the email blast together earlier in the work week and it gets vetted, and multiple opinions come in. How do you think we ought to organize this? Those kind of things to address that kind of concern. And then, I'm envisioning a basic communication plan that would include lessons learned from this and other projects that would be the starting point, and then we would tweak it for the individual project as they move forward, right? And if there's an impact on the school system, to address Councilmember Behrman's comments, that would be something that we'd have to make sure we include on that one, and that would be a talking point that would be in that base plan, and we pick and choose which ones get that particular point included on. So I've got some ideas. I'm sure Drew has a ton of ideas already forming in his head. I'm sure Tim has ideas forming in his head as well, and we'll put that together and come up with a base plan, and then the next time we have a project of this sort, we'll bring it to council in advance of the project and have some discussion on it.
Sure. And I sympathize. It's what you just described is not a little task that anybody can do. It's work to have a social media presence. I mean, that's what I do for a living. Is I'm in that business. So it's no little thing what you're describing. I definitely appreciate that. You'll need to put some resources to it, and that isn't always, the resources aren't always there.
We're committed to doing better on the next project. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, not to belabor the point, but you may recall at one of our last meetings, you all approved a public participation plan that we had brought forward. Yes, that's geared more towards kind of development projects, but that, just to point that out, the tools that we list in there, the processes, the things to think about, we do anticipate that being a guide for these as well. So I just wanted to say, we need to work on implementation, clearly. We just started that, but something we think about.
Good. And just one last comment. I thought the letter from Miss Caldwell was, as nice as it could be. She almost seemed sorry to be complaining, but it was a very legitimate issue to bring up, and she peppered it with plenty of other compliments on just getting the job done. But she really thought we needed to deal with this, and she's correct. That's all. Thank you.
Councilmember Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I can't figure out which one of you guys has the over tonight. Two things. One, Spalding to Decker just came up, and I was like, oh yeah, they were the ones that bid like a quarter of the price of somebody else, and now we have these problems. I don't think it has anything to do with that, it sounds like. The other thing was, we talked in our goal-setting sessions about having an ad hoc policies manual with a variety of things. The need for a communication plan as part of a major project could be something we just talk informally about in ad hoc policies, that we talk about the need on council to reevaluate those policies and procedures. I think, didn't we say it's been like 20 years or something since that book's been updated and how we do business? Anyway, we talked about doing that at the beginning of the year when the new council's in session, so thank you.
Are you satisfied with everything?
Yeah, I think it was productive. I think if we can start attaching communications plans, everything, that'd be a good thing for the city.
Okay, very good. And with that, that concludes the new business portion of the meeting tonight. We'll move on to the second call to the public. I'll read the rules to call the public in, and they are as follows. The public shall address the council during the call to the public, which shall be included in the agenda immediately after correspondence and immediately again after new business. The first call to the public immediately after correspondence shall be limited to agenda items only. A person shall not address the council in excess of 5 minutes unless the time is extended by a majority vote of council present. Persons wishing to address the council shall identify themselves and their place of residence and shall state their reason for addressing the council, and all comments by the public shall be made directly to the council. Go ahead, Mr. Meredith.
Russ Meredith, 378 Fletcher, and with keeping with Mr. Gospel's rules, I will try to keep this short. When it comes to sidewalks, as someone who walks and bikes the city rather extensively, I would definitely prefer to see contiguous sidewalks on both sides, because I've reached the age where crossing the street to go from A to B to C to D isn't as fast as I used to, and despite the best work of Chief Langmeyer's folks to try and control the speed, they're doing a great job. As Mr. Simka's group tries to remove the natural speed reduction systems we have on the roads, the order of probability people are going to be speeding is greater than 0. So I definitely would like to see sidewalks and bike paths on both sides. Thank you very much.
Very good. Anybody else? I'll close that second call to the public. Move on to city manager's comments. City Manager Brown.
Thank you, Your Honor. Going through the city manager update that I provided, we've got a joint meeting of, I think, an expanded group here with the City Council, Downtown Development Authority, Planning Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals, Parks and Recreation Commission that we've got scheduled for Wednesday, May 31st at 6 p.m. We've got a dinner that will be served at 5:30 if you care to participate with that, and we're asking you to reply to Drew Benson about your attendance at same. We've got some exciting stuff to talk about at that particular meeting, and I'll defer to Drew to flesh it out for you. But there's some good things to talk about there, and we would appreciate all of your input and all the potential input of all the different members of all those different boards, because we think it's going to result in a better product for us at the end when we institute something that will come out of that meeting. And then the other thing I wanted to mention was work anniversaries. We got City of Wixom having 9 employees that are celebrating their work anniversaries in the month of June. From a low of 3 years to a high of 25 years. And I wanted to mention Sergeant Brian Stawinski being the banner carrier there at 25 years. But he's just about to end that run.
His retirement is June 8th.
Exactly. Yeah. Sticking around to hit the 25-year mark, and then he's going to retire. So. Congratulations to him and for that and for the retirement, and then everybody that's on the list for their work anniversaries. We appreciate all the good work they do on our behalf and the residents' behalf and the businesses' behalf. So that's all I had, Your Honor. If there's anything I can help with beyond that, I'll do my best. So.
Assistant City Manager Benson.
Thank you, Mayor. Steve mentioned the joint meeting. We have a lot of exciting information. The main topic will be Renton, obviously. Preliminary work in a lot of facets, whether with our boards and commissions who've kind of given preliminary input, as well as DTE, the RCOC. We have a lot of information, and I think I'm very optimistic about how you all will look at this conversation about the city-owned properties. But we also will probably do a light introduction to where we're at master plan update, and that's where the Mac Park piece. I don't think we're going to look at the whole city system, but there's kind of an overlap though. How that conversation goes. So looking forward to that. The only other thing I have to mention is I wanted to shout out Petronas Industries, who hosted a 35th anniversary ribbon cutting event. It was well attended. It was open to the public on May 17th. They even had an ice cream truck. But it was great to see a company who built their building here in Wixom back when still farm fields, and to see that they're still here. So I think we saw a couple of you there, and it's just a wonderful company, been good to the city. The only 2 other things, we will be looking to schedule ribbon cuttings or celebratory events in June for Wixom Motors, which used to be Denise's Restaurant. They're finally getting to a point where they will open. We can all take a look at what's become of that space, as well as Renaissance Global Logistics. They're now ready to kind of have a larger welcome event. So keep an eye out for some additional information from me, but hopefully you all, as well as our community partners, will be able to attend.
Marilyn, you want to add anything? Kathy, you want to add anything?
No, thank you.
Okay. Council comments. Councilmember Smiley.
Just a couple quick things. Marilyn and staff, thank you again for another fine job with the budget. I know the job's never done, but let's call it done for this. There's a breaking point now that it's been approved, right? Okay. Now you begin on the next one.
We get to upload it in the system and start using it.
There you go, okay. Other than that, just everyone please have a safe and happy Memorial Day. Thank you.
Councilmember Behrman.
Just a couple things. I noticed that the fence that got taken out downtown has been replaced, so I appreciate that that was fixed timely. I hope that we can timely fix the brick wall downtown that got taken out again. I saw that the tree is mostly gone, but there's still a lot of remnants there to be cleaned up. Then I also noticed the box at Maple and Wixom Road that you got fixed. Someone hit the pole. So, I mean, perhaps if we could just put the pole back up, that might save the box. Or just convince them to move the thing. But my wife had the opportunity to, looks like Deanna gave up on us, but my wife had the opportunity to attend the Mom-Son Dance, which was I guess the first time we've done that, and my boys had a great time with that, and so I appreciate the city putting that on. And then my last thing, with all this work we're doing downtown, new sidewalks, just west of downtown, I see they're tearing everything up to do underground utility work. It looks like today they were digging a big hole right next to the new trail we just put in last year. Are we doing anything to monitor this work and make sure they're remediating it afterward? Because I remember a couple of years ago, they bored right in front of City Hall, and that access panel box is still crooked. It never got fixed. They never really seated it right. I mean, is there a way that we could look in making them have to get permits to do this work in the city, and where we can follow up and make sure that they remediate it properly? Because it seems to be like, I mean, we're going to put this brand new sidewalk in with brand new planters, and then they're going to be in possibly next week digging it back up to pour a new line.
We do require right-of-way permits for work that's done within the right-of-way, so there is already a permitting process where we have to know what's going on and what's happening. There are some, obviously fixing it or bringing it back to standards requirements that come with that. Is it perfect every time? It sounds like no. But yes, we do have a process in place for work that happens within the right-of-way through utilities or otherwise.
Tim and I just had an extensive conversation about an issue that was coming up that was going to, let me just conservatively say, seriously impact a brand new trail pavement that we have along Pontiac Trail in front of Country Corners. And Tim has successfully parried that plan and required or suggested strongly that they do something different than that, and that's maybe what you're seeing. And Tim's well aware of that and will be very much involved with the utility to make sure that things get made right there. But he's already been heavily involved and kept a bigger problem from happening, which would have been ludicrous, frankly.
There's two sections of the trail that got cut out in between AFC and Horrocks that got put back in that are like speed bumps because they're not level, and they're not even, I mean, it's not even the same section they took out, they put back in.
We talked about that as well. I don't know if you want to talk about it.
So I guess that's I just see them constantly doing that work, but it never seems like they put it back together.
Yep, so this project right now is ongoing, and we aren't requiring the restoration until they're complete. And that project that is west of Wixom Road right now is a gas replacement program. They're replacing the line all the way down Pontiac Trail. That's a Pontiac Trail, as you know, is primarily a county road, and so the majority of that work was permitted through Oakland County. We had some minor questions on that early on before, and that was just before they cut out those portions on the north side of Pontiac Trail into our newly paved asphalt there on the trail. We will get that re-leveled this summer, and they will replace and restore all of that. As you know, this is an ongoing problem with different things. The AT&T box is different than the fiber line that went through. Wasn't connected to AT&T, so it's their box. I think that is the issue that you're talking about here on Pontiac Trail and Wixom Road. Those are all different things that require people to look at, and unfortunately I'm only one person, and it just doesn't happen as quickly as I see it sometimes. And it is on our watch list. We've got 2 foremen that were out there as well. They're cutting portions of our sidewalk on the south side of Pontiac Trail. They're working with them to get a complete replacement of those, not just half of a block, a block on those. But yeah, again, that's taking away from our neighborhood sidewalk program. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Councilmember Gatchel.
Thank you. I guess worried about straightening out the boxes if they're just going to get hit again is a funny thing. But one thing that I did notice in reports or minutes from our other boards was in one of the sets of the DDA minutes, they put out the proposal for the barn feasibility study and got nothing back, and I think that kind of probably speaks a little bit to the feasibility of the barn. I know there was discussion about maybe getting some public input and whatnot, but I think at this point it would be nice to entertain a recommendation to possibly tear down the barn and kind of end that or decide what we're going to do with it, rather than letting that drag on without any future, one way or the other. I think that's something we should discuss and put some finality on in the upcoming meetings. Thank you.
Councilmember Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to thank Steve and Marilyn and their teams for a great budget process. I thought we compromised appropriately. We had good discussion back and forth, a lot of mixed votes, which is always good to see in my mind. And we're certainly better off than McCarthy and Biden are at the debt ceiling. So thank you.
Councilmember Grella Fox.
I too would like to thank administration for all the work that they did. I know what goes into that. It's a lot of work, so thank you very much. And then I'd like to thank and congratulate all those employees celebrating work anniversaries, and a special shout out to Brian and congratulations. That's a milestone celebration. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Resnick.
Thank you, Mayor. I also was able to attend Petronas Industries 35th anniversary party. That was nice. And if you've never had an ice cream stuffed punchki, you got to try one. They were awesome. No, it's fascinating to see all these small businesses in the city and what they manufacture and what they do. Up and down Beck Road, back in the Century Park. It's just any chance you get a chance to attend these, do so, because it's fascinating how much we actually manufacture and produce in this city. Also, a note tonight on our seldom used safety paths, which were extremely busy tonight. Councilman Behrman and I happened to be stopped at the same light, and we noticed that the Hawk Light was initiated 3 separate times by 3 separate groups simultaneously, one after the other. And we had thought that Road Commissioner of Oakland County was going to put some delay in that so that the timing wouldn't be one right after the other.
Yeah, I put into communication to John Hensler about that, but I don't have good feedback on that, the way that it was handled or wasn't handled. I know that we talked about potentially having some limitations on the number of times it could be fired, if you will, and some time in between. But by the same token, they were also acting as if there might be the possibility of tying it to the signal timing with some other work. And I think perhaps it got caught up in that. I will follow up with John Hensler, who's the trail manager, tomorrow and find out why the alternative wasn't implemented, if it was indeed possible, and we can go from there. I was disappointed to see that was an issue for you this evening, so I heard about it from somebody else.
Oh, did you?
Maybe said,
Okay.
You're right.
Very good. That's it.
Very good. And I want to thank Marilyn and Steve, Drew, and other department heads for a terrific job on the budget this year. Like Councilmember Sharp said, there was some great discussion, there were some concessions, but it was done in a professional manner. We got it done. And I know this is kind of asking a lot, but I think next year, if up here on the dais, if we could leave the last week of April open on our calendars so we don't have any problems trying to schedule a budget session, and that way we've got the whole week open, so hopefully we can get at least 1 or 2 of those days put in cement and we can get this done instead of going back and forth, and it's taking 2 weeks to schedule a one-day meeting. So, and then I'd like to thank and congratulate everybody who's celebrating a work anniversary. Mr. Sigma, 8 years with him. And then also I want to congratulate Sergeant Stawinski on his retirement and thank him for his years of service. And a little something to think of up here. Our senior officer right now, with the exception of our lieutenant, is 38 years old. So we got a pretty young staff right now. So, but that in some ways that's good because these guys want to go out and they want to do the police work, and so I'm excited about the future with those fellows that we have there. But and with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.